Hello, my name is Ostrin Fire, and welcome to another channel update. Um, so as you may have noted, the last time I did a channel update was 2 months ago, just before I went on my trip to see my parents. Um, as you may well remember, since it wasn't that long ago, I'm sure it feels like it was. But since it wasn't that long ago, you may remember that I had started doing my Final Fantasy 14, I guess, music video project, and it was going strong. And then I went to visit my parents and kind of fell off the rails. And truth be told, I had never intended on falling off the rails quite like I did. I don't know. I guess I always assumed that I was gonna like go back into it slowly, but I didn't expect to kind of just stop outside of one video. Um, but it's been a difficult couple of months, in no small part because earlier this week, in the wee hours of the morning on Monday, my father passed away. He lost his battle with cancer. So, I suppose that's kind of the chief reason. I ran out of words there. Good job, me. Anything bad can happen, but I can still just completely stumble over every single word I'm trying to say. Um, the honest goodness truth, though, is that the past couple of months have been kind of difficult because, I mean, even going home like I did, just to see my parents, I didn't quite, I didn't quite expect my father to be in the state he was in. I didn't quite expect him to be as diminished as he was, for lack of a better word. Um, because the last time I saw him was back in 2017. Last time I saw both my parents, frankly, was 2017, and I visited on Thanksgiving. It was only a couple of months after my father was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, he was like very thin. It was kind of gaunt back then, um, but he still had a lot of his strength, a lot of his vibrancy. He wasn't, it wasn't. He was. It's not like he was just resting all the time. He was still pretty active, all things considered. He wasn't working, of course, but other than that, he was up and about, and he was talking and chatting and all that, and everything basically seemed, outside of the fact that he had lost a lot of weight and he had poured for his chemo, nothing was seemed particularly weird or different, and he actually recovered from that point. Um, According to my mother, much to the doctor's surprise, because his body had been so severely compromised by the cancer. But he had recovered from that point. He had regained his weight. Excuse me. He had regained his weight, and he had regained a lot of his energy. He had all his energy and everything. And I guess the 3 years, well, 2.5-ish years since that point, I guess it's just been kind of a very slow degradation. Like there was no, like nothing changed for like the longest time, for like a year and a half after that, basically. Um, Nothing had changed at all. Like everything was kind of the same. Last year I started Skyping my parents regularly. Just to kind of keep up with them, and so that we could actually do something together, given that I'm 2.5 states away from them. And now that I think about it in hindsight, I realize, it's like I was kind of watching this slow deterioration, because when those Skype calls started, probably about a year ago now, my father was still basically fine. Like there was still, like there was still treatments going on and everything, chemotherapy and whatnot, um, but, uh, but it was all basically normal. I'd call them right after breakfast, maybe the TV would be on. It's stuff like that. And for my family, it was all pretty normal. And especially in like maybe the past 6 months, a little bit longer, things kind of started to kind of deteriorate. Like my father would be downstairs, but he'd have to leave, or well, actually, that's what it was. Like he would be downstairs, but then he would have to leave, and then what would happen is that and that time would get shorter and shorter and shorter, because his discomfort would be growing. He would have to go to the bathroom, or he would, be in too much discomfort to sit down for long periods of time. And then eventually it kind of moved on to, he just stopped coming downstairs, and he would have, and my mother would have to bring the computer up to him, so I could see him, and we'd have chats and discussions, and then even then, the periods of time with which I would talk to him would shorten and shorten, especially as I would run out of things. I'll put it to you this way. I didn't have a bad relationship with my father, especially more recently, especially actually since I moved out. I feel like I've had a much better relationship with my father than ever before. I'd be lying if I wouldn't say he was a bit of a difficult man to grow up with. That's no slight against him. It's just I always found him to be a bit strict and a little bit hard to get along with because we're very different individuals. I'm kind of skinny and not very strong, not inclined towards physical activity. I'm very bookish. I'm not so bookish that I can't, lift a 50-pound what? I can't lift it's not like I can't lift a 50-pound box or something. Though admittedly it's quite of a challenge for someone like me. But that also wasn't true, like, say, 5-6 years ago. And that was far more true when I was growing up. And so it was definitely, so it's like, I would say that my father and I never grew to be particularly close. And we definitely got closer. We definitely got closer in the past few years. That's definitely something that I can say is true. Even with the distances and all that. But we were different, and it definitely had an influence on the sort of relationship we had, right? I don't know why I got off on that tangent, truth be told, but I'm sure it was important. Truth be told, it's kind of difficult to gather my thoughts at the moment. I kind of went into this not really sure what precisely I wanted to say. I've kind of been batting it around and whatnot. And I don't know, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult to talk about, but I want to talk about it because I don't know. Maybe it will be cathartic or something. Aha! If I said it slowly, I could actually say it. Actually, if I said anything slowly, I could actually say it. But that's not me, as anyone who lives around here could tell you. It was definitely a slow deterioration, and when I kind of traveled there back in May, and this is a big part actually of the reason why I traveled in May, is because I kind of because I don't know, I guess maybe subconsciously I kind of realized that my father was deteriorating, and it was very slow, very gradual, and in a lot of ways this last couple of weeks snuck up on us, but I think I recognized that I couldn't put the visit off any longer. So in spite of the coronavirus and all that, I realized I had to visit. I realized that I could not, or it was not wise to put it off for any longer. And I think a lot of things came together rather nicely in May to make the trip work the way to make the trip work out the way it did. And it was a nice visit. It was definitely a nice visit. I am in Pennsylvania for 3 years, and Pennsylvania, even now, Pennsylvania remains my favorite place I've ever lived. Being up in the Poconos, a bit of a tourist trap, but it's very beautiful. The air is very clean and all that, and it's very nice to be up there. And I always feel very at home up there. At the same time, just to see how my father was different it definitely impacts. Sorry, you're gonna get a lot of that. I've been stumbling over my words a lot lately. I don't know why, but it definitely impacted me a lot. To see my father, like, basically, he wasn't bedridden, but to see my father basically kind of spending more time resting in bed than being up and about, he really had breakfast with me and my mother, or dinner with me and my mother. He was always preoccupied. He was either resting or he was asleep or whatever, so I didn't get to see him, at like at regular meals or everything. And it was, and the sharpness and the vibrancy wasn't there. I don't know what precisely that was, if it was just him coping with the increasing pain from the growth of the tumors or what, but it was it wasn't what I remembered, and it it definitely had a it definitely had an impact on me. Not that words words. And I think it's had a major impact on my mood recently, especially. Um, like it certainly impacted my mood before that point. The my father's condition because I, what was it back in March maybe, possibly even April itself. Um, it had been determined that the chemotherapy treatments were doing nothing to curtail the growth of the tumors anymore, and after one like little last ditch treatment effort, it kind of, kind of, we kind of put, it eventually came to an end, and then I guess it just progressed from there. And about 2 weeks ago, a little more maybe, 2.5 at this point actually, uh, my father, my father started to decline precipitously, and from there, just it's funny because I keep thinking about the kind of in the last few weeks, especially, it's been very difficult to kind of well, the past few months, but last few weeks, especially with the Skype calls, it was very difficult to have like conversations with my father because he just wasn't all focused there, and I'm not very good at driving conversations at all. If you don't have something kind of to say right off the bat, that isn't more than how are you, because I will answer how are you with fine every single time, or all right, or it's okay, or I've been better, something like that. But I'll answer with kind of like short final answers because I can be a conversationalist, but you have to kind of get me to that point. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get me talking. But once you get me talking, like I will just keep going and going and going. It's kind of like how these videos always turn out, where I start to ramble. And because that's just kind of how my mind works. My mind works by, starting in one point and then jumping from point to point to point to point, sometimes never getting back to the first point, even though the first point never got finished. But if you never get me started at that point, then conversation with me just dies. And that was one of the chief things I was experiencing with my father on these Skype calls, week in and week out. And I hated it because it's like I didn't really know what to say. And I wasn't, I mean, it's not like I had things to talk about myself. It's like there's things going on in my life that are worth talking about. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult when you kind of see your father kind of diminishing and you have nothing to say to him. There's things, you want to say things and you want to have good news to tell him, and you want to tell him that your life's going somewhere and that you have things going on and so forth, and you just don't. And you want to try and make that happen, but you have no idea how. Um, and towards the end, he was especially getting loopy, especially partially because I think because of his medications and all that, for the pain and all that, it's kind of making him loopy, kind of making him unfocused. Um, and honestly, I feel like the last like truly coherent thing he said to me was like, because for last couple of Skype calls where he was actually like where he still relatively cogent, there was just a lot of silence. Like there was just silence, and I didn't know what to say or what to think or whatever. And I don't know, I kept thinking I was being shy, and he would sing "He's So Shy," and it was silly and goofy and actually kind of vaguely out of character. Um, but singing "He's So Shy" was kind of one of the last things he kind of said to me that I think had any remote meaning. Because I mean, the last thing he really said to me was on a house party, I think, with him, and And even in his loopiest of states, for whatever reason, he still recognized me, you know. And my mother would bring the camera up to his face and say, "It's Osei," and he'd say, "Hi, son." And I mean, you could barely understand him because the how do you describe it? His mouth wasn't working properly, basically. You know, he was having trouble speaking coherently, and my mother really kind of had to experience the brunt of that in a certain grim way. I'm kind of grateful for that because I don't know if I could have handled it, but basically, this is what I've been living with for the past few months and the last couple of weeks, especially. And it's been very difficult. I would reiterate the point that I wasn't that close to my father, but he was still my father. You know, he was still the man that brought me into the world. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It's funny because I really kind of have taken it all in stride, in no small part because I guess me and my mother, we kind of saw the end coming, so just like it's hit us, but you know, it hasn't completely destroyed us or anything. It just has been what it has been. You know, you can only do so much. But by the way, you have to pardon me. I know I've been playing with this the entire video. It's a keychain my mother sent me. It's the Razorback from The Mandalorian. Cheap little thing, but I don't know. When I got things on my mind, I fidget a lot, and I play with things that are in the general vicinity. Probably shouldn't have things I can play with on my desk as a result, but here we are. But I apologize if I haven't really been looking into the camera or seem to have been focused more on this while I've been talking. But I think it's helping. I don't think I could get through talking about this stuff without like having something in my hands because that's just how I am. But it's definitely been a couple of weeks, and now he's gone, and now my mother's going through his belongings, and she got his ashes back in a couple of small urns, and it's been I don't know how to cope. I don't know how to cope with it, truth be told. I don't know at all. I suppose I just started making this video because I just wanted to talk more than anything, because I don't know what I'm going to do with the channel at the moment. You know, there's a bunch of things I could do, of course. You know, I could just start uploading content, the random things I've been doing lately in Final Fantasy XIV. Of course, Divide and Conquer still has that new version I've yet to really dabble in. I do want to finish that playlist regardless of anything else. You know, because I actually have been having a lot of fun making those videos. They've actually been challenging me in a lot of ways to actually make better videos than I normally do, with superior editing and whatnot. But I don't know, because I mean I have content from the next video actually all recorded. I just need to actually take the time to put it together. But the other thing that sucks too is that I think I mentioned in the video before I visited my parents that I wanted to do a little project, and that was a project where I interview my father, just so I could learn something about his history and what he grew up in and everything. Because part of the reason we were so different is because we grew up very, very differently. You know, he grew up. You know, he spent like the first 30 years of his life, about to my age, really. Living in Guyana, in South America. You know, he lived in a very different place than the United States of America. And he grew up in a very different culture. He grew up in overall a much more rural culture than mine. And, so that's part of what made him different and part of what made him harder to understand because, especially me, because, almost all my half siblings are way, way older than me. And grew up way more like him than they did like me. But you know, I grew up in the age of technology. Basically, you know, I was born in 1989, and I basically grew up with computers, and I grew up with all sorts of things that, you know, he never would have even had, or even even would have fathomed having. And that makes us very different. You know, that made us very, very different. But where was I going with this? Son of a gun! I just remembered why I got off on that tangent about Guyana. Okay, so I'm definitely recording this after I just did the conclusion of that thing. So what I want to do is I wanted to interview my father about his past experiences, and I got one session out of him that lasted about 15-20 minutes or so, and that was it. And it wasn't the most coherent of interviews. I'm not very good at getting people to focus either. Oh, Lord knows, being a department manager taught me that. But I'm not very good at that sort of thing, and Lord knows it's harder with someone whose mind is kind of a million miles away sometimes. And I only really got that one session. And if I had gotten more, if I had been able to get more stories, more ideas, I might have been able to piece together like a decent sort of video for that, as I had wanted to. But as it stands, I couldn't do that because it's too little. It's too little content. I can't, you know, I know a lot more actually about like what his life was like before my mother came into the picture. I know more about his previous marriages and so forth, and kind of what preceded him coming to the United States. Not that much. I wish I knew a little more about that, but I know more basically, but it's not enough to, I think, make a video for release to the general public. So I suppose what I'll do is I'll just hang on to onto the audio file and, you know, back it up in a couple of places and just hang on to it for now. It's a pity because I had hoped that he would, you know, that he would have more good days, basically, because he had a lot of days where he was just kind of too tired and too out of it to really, like, talk or to talk coherently or to talk for a long period of time. And good days were just so rare after a point, and it just sucks. Anyway, all right, future me, cut this in where it belongs. You know where. I feel like I probably should stop rambling because I've almost been recording for almost 23 minutes. Not all that was talking, but a lot of it was. I guess I'll end this with something shush. But I think I'm fine. I guess I'll end this with what I wrote on my personal Facebook page. Honestly, if you look around for it, you'll actually find it because it's public. I probably should have made this for friends only, but I think it's okay as is, because unless there's something I really want to hide from the public, there's just no reason, I think, to make it private. It's not like someone can't hack it anyway, but the first part of this is actually related to the picture I chose for the post, but no, screw it. I'll just cover it. Let me move the microphone up a little bit. I probably should have moved this up to begin with. North Korean hostage situation, 2020, colorized. Mother will probably take a less than favorable view of me choosing to share this image, as it isn't the most flattering image I took during my visit 2 months ago. But it's also rather funny. And today, the day that he departed this world to be with the Lord, I'd rather remember him by something unintentionally funny then something more solid? Serious? Not quite the right words, but something in between them. The honest-to-goodness truth is that the visit was much harder on me emotionally than I would have let on. My father was in a greatly diminished state than I last remembered, all the way back in 2017. Back then, even though he had lost a lot of weight and strength, his spirit was strong and his faith stronger still, and he bounced back from those early days. But this time, he wasn't just weakened, he was deteriorating. I could tell. His weight was dropping again, he wasn't moving around as much, there was a lot of pain. The sharpness and clarity I expected from him wasn't quite there anymore. It was hard to watch. That said, I can't actually say I have many regrets now. It was just the nature of things between us. There are things I wish I had done, things I wish I could have done. I wish I'd been able to make him more proud of me, given him real, solid reasons to look upon me with joy. As it is, he'll never see me truly find my footing in life. He'll never see me get married, never see me have children. He won't get to see me in 10 or 20 years, nor will I him. Robust as he was, we always talked about how he'd power on into his 90s, stubborn as ever, maybe even still working, knowing him. Alas, it was not to be. But even though there's much consternation in my heart, in a way I am still at peace with it. There's no longer sickness, no longer pain, no longer any suffering. For him there is just joy. Joy at being with his Lord and Savior in whom he placed his faith. Joy at being beyond the difficulties of this life. And one day we will meet again. One day, beyond the troubles and fears of this world, we will be reunited, cradled in the embrace of God. So today I choose this picture to remember him by. A picture that unintentionally gave me a little joy where there otherwise might have been none. A picture where his mind traveled away from the camera for a few seconds and he became my mother's prisoner. Unfocused eyes pleading for freedom from her tyranny. Farewell, Holman Dixon. Until our paths cross.